What is up? What is up? YouTube, how y'all doing? Check it out, man. Y'all hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. This is a Nolan Wells update. The Nolan Wells tragedy exposed, sunken place, sellout. Anyway, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. Appreciate y'all, man. Appreciate everybody rolling with a brother and all that good stuff. Let's check it out.
If we deal with the reality of the cruelty of slavery, you have to, in fact, understand the people who benefited from that institution. You have to ask yourself more difficult questions. So James Baldwin would say, they can't believe what I say is happening to them. They can't believe what we say that's happening to us around the police. They can't believe what we're saying is happening to us when we walk into banks. They can't believe what we're saying that's happening to our children in public schools, because to believe it requires a kind of honesty with what they are complicit in, right? So the fact that we can say to folks, a district attorney would have arrested all of those black kids if a white boy didn't return. You don't know that. Exactly. But the fact that denial comes is to deny our experience.
Right. Eddie Glaude Jr., thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure.
This book is fantastic. He is the author of a new book called America, USA, How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversaries. Eddie S. Glaude Jr., best-selling author of Begin Again. I saw you this week and I started talking to you about how this Nolan Wells story has really penetrated the consciousness of America and Americans, especially African Americans. It's really captured the hearts. Why is that? What is going on here? Because everyone is, people are saying there's race involved and others are saying it's not involved, but tell me why and then we'll get into that.
Well, I think it has everything to do with the fact that we are experiencing the collapse of the world that made our lives possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's really important for us to understand that the Voting Rights Act is no more. They've gutted it. They're redrawing districts across the South. We're seeing a wholesale assault on the world, the society, the law, the infrastructure that the civil rights movement made possible. So, and it's overshadowed by, or let me say it differently, it's driven by, right, some explicit white ideology, white nationalist ideology. So it makes sense to me that these sorts of events, whether it turns out to be the case or not, are read through a racial lens, precisely because we have white nationalists, it seems to me, who are controlling the federal government in so many places.
White nationalists controlling the federal government.
That's what I believe.
And you think that the reason that people are engaged with this is in some part because of that?
I think race, I make, not to mention the book, I think, there is this
divided soul. Because you talk about this in the book, and I think people should read this book. Yeah.
This divided soul that America imagines itself as a beacon of freedom and as a white republic. That there are folks who are in office in this moment who are asserting and insisting that this country remains and must forever be a white republic. And we all feel it. We see it with immigration policy. We see it with the ending of TPS. We see it with the Johns Hopkins researcher who was kidnapped and shipped to 3 different places. We see it with the assault on the Voting Rights Act. So it makes sense in a place like Mississippi, which is often seen as a metaphor for the country, a state that I'm from. I'm from Jackson County. I played baseball against Ocean Springs. I'm down there. I understand it. And so it's like air. Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense that people would read this moment in the way they're reading it, because we're experiencing it in our daily lives.
I could have used you. I did an interview this week with an African-American gentleman, a man of color. I'm not sure his exact ethnicity, but I think he's a African-American. And he said, when are we going to get over it and stop talking about it? The racism down here is not like what people think or portraying it to be. People are getting married. They're, having interrelations, if you know what I mean, having biracial kids. And he goes, it's not like that. We're in an army town. This place is not like that. Mississippi, the Emmett Till, he said, Emmett Till was 100 years ago. That's what he says.
I wonder if he's ever heard Tate Reeves talk, the governor of Mississippi, who is, he loves his Confederate history. I wonder if he understands, let me just say it differently. Of course, there are folk who have their different experiences, and they may not read the world through the lens of race. and it could be a way in which they manage their lives and their
That's me.
loves. Okay. But the reality is this, is that Mississippi is a black state, 30, 40% black. And we know the level of poverty. We know at the level of education. We know the racism that has defined that state over generations. We know the differences in the way in which law enforcement behaves on one side of the tracks as opposed to the other. You and I are from down there. You don't have to tell us about Creole and my family. There are Glaudes that look like me and Glaudes that don't, right? That are white. And so I think if we're honest with ourselves, we just have to tell the truth about what shapes us and what is shaping us.
I'm so glad you said that, because where I grew up, and I grew up in Louisiana, and I told the guy, I was like, you don't have to tell me what it's like.
Yeah.
And I go there enough. My family comes there. They just left here, and they say, when we come here, we feel like we're in a whole different world. It doesn't feel as oppressive as whatever, because they're in the heart of it. They're in deep red Louisiana. And so, there are white Bolognese. I write about this in my book, and there are black Bolognese, right? And then there are some who not sure what they are. And when I got my history, when the professor did my history, I found out about both the white side and the black side of my family. Henry Louis Gates, when he did it on the PBS show.
Finding Your Roots, yeah.
But how can he not know? I mean, what?
It's willful ignorance. Watching the episode, you see him, and there's this kind of tension in his comments that it doesn't exist. It's not like what it was. And the worry, to name it, is to somehow stoke the flames, right? So it's not what it was, but if we keep talking about it, we're going to make people angry. We're going to generate a kind of intense backlash, which suggests that it is present. You see? So there's
because you don't want to draw attention to it.
Right.
That means it's like the thing that's when you're like, well, we don't want to talk about
exactly.
that.
Exactly. So there's a way in which historically we've navigated these spaces, because the most dangerous place for a black person, as D.L. Hughley said, is in a white person's imagination, right? And we understand the harm that can follow from white rage. We're clear about that. That's an inheritance, as it were. So some people have I think, an orientation to how we ought to get along in order to tamp down the potential conflicts that may arise from telling the truth about how we live our lives.
It got me to thinking, do people really know the definition of racism? Do they really know what it is? I kept pointing out to him that just because it's not, someone doesn't portray it openly, right? Yeah. Or if they're not openly saying the N-word or treating people, where you can see it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Yeah. Do you think people understand, or they know what the definition of racism is?
Sometimes we try to reduce it to a definition, Don. And oftentimes that gets us in trouble. We don't know the difference between, say, white supremacist practices and racial prejudice and the like. But I love W.B. Du Bois's understanding of Jim Crow and racism in Dusk of Dawn. He says, if you want to know what Jim Crow is, if you want to know what racism is, white supremacy, just look at the back of a Jim Crow car. That's all you need to do is look at the practice, look at the differential outcomes. So if you live in a society, as I wrote in Democracy in Black, if you live in a society that's organized along the lines of the value gap, where some people are valued more than others because of the color of their skin, that valuation doesn't just simply evidence itself in explicit words of prejudices. It organizes our lives. It affects the distribution of benefit and burden. So you learn racism by just simply driving around Ocean Springs, driving around Moss Point, which is 20 minutes east of Ocean Springs. You turn one corner, you're in one neighborhood. You see the nature of the houses. In my little town, when I was growing up on the east side of Moss Point, because the plumbing wasn't right, the pipes were, when it rained, that side of town flooded. Our baseball diamonds weren't cut as much. The schools weren't as good, right? So you learn how the value gap evidences itself, not just simply by people being explicitly racist, right? It's about the way in which benefit and burden is distributed, are distributed in some ways. But, some people just want to see hooded masks, somebody shouting the N-word, as opposed to, people treating racial justice as a philanthropic enterprise, something that I do for you, and you should be grateful to me because I possess it. So it gets complicated in that regard.
They don't understand the systems that have been put in place and that need to be undone and unraveled in order to really to get people to understand what it is and to actually see it, to take the blinders off. Now, he would say, well, you know, the baseball diamond thing and all that, when you were growing up, that was a whole nother time. That doesn't happen now. And again, he said, how long are we going to keep talking about this? If we keep talking about it, then it's never not my words, his words. I'm just saying. But
no, see, the thing is that how we talk about it, you know, there's some social science data which says that if you keep identifying the problem in this sort of way, it triggers a kind of reaction that leads folk to a kind of retrenchment. They double down on their prejudices because they're being accused of X, Y, and Z. Right. So I get that.
Yep,
so I want to understand from whence that claim comes. If we keep naming it, if we keep accusing people, people are going to retreat into their silos so they don't have to deal with it. But it's also the case that, you know, you can't keep lying to yourself.
Yeah. But also, I mean, some people take it personally, even if you're not accusing them, if you're trying to point out what has happened historically over time, or just that there's a system, they think that you are personally attacking them. And then people, you're right. Like you said, there's a retrenchment that happens but there's not a personal attack. It's like you and I can sit here. I'm sure you and I don't agree on everything. I won't see it as a personal attack though. And, you know, I'll just say, you know, Eddie, I just disagree with you.
Oh, absolutely. But if the judgment cuts to the core of who you take yourself to be. So it's like this. We can't talk about, we have to have happy slaves. Why do we have to have happy slaves? Because if we deal with the reality of the cruelty of slavery, you have to, in fact, understand the people who benefited from that institution. You have to ask yourself more difficult questions. So James Baldwin would say, they can't believe what I say is happening to me. They can't believe what we say that's happening to us around the police. They can't believe what we're saying is happening to us when we walk into banks. They can't believe what we're saying that's happening to our children in public schools, because to believe it requires a kind of honesty with what they are complicit in, right? So the fact that we can say to folks, you know, a district attorney would have arrested all of those black kids if a white boy didn't return.
You don't know that.
Exactly. But the fact that denial comes is to deny our experience.
Right.
Is to deny what we have come to, what can become to be described as a kind of racial common sense. Right. So because to concede it is to concede something about themselves. Right. So it can't be true. So Baldwin will say in Many Thousands Gone, I have to wash myself. I have to wash my face blank in order to wash away your guilt. That the precondition for my entree in the world is that I have to leave the particularity of my experience at the door so that you can be white without judgment.
Wow.
Okay. And so when we bring the wealth of our experience, so it makes sense, common sense to black folk. They're supposed to be friends and they left him out there and he didn't come back. And then you draw on Emmett Till and you draw on all the stuff that has made us who we are. It seems and of course people are the conspiracy theories are through the roof, but still.
No, you're right, because I tried to say that to this gentleman. I don't want to keep harping on him, but I said, look at the history of the country. Yeah, Emmett Till did happen in Mississippi, and you don't understand why race is a part of it. I want to know, when you look at this picture, right? When you look at this picture, I wonder what you see and what other people see.
If I saw it without knowledge that Nolan Wells is dead, what would I see? First thing, they look like they've been drinking, but why is that boy? Well, he should be careful. Can't be out there by himself. It's first thing. They look like they're having nice fun. These two look at it. Got to be careful. I hope he's not out there by himself. Now, with the knowledge that he didn't return, then the question is, why would he go out there knowing? Whole host of questions, right? Because now I grew up in a small town in Moss Point, Mississippi.
Not far from here.
Not far from there. And there are occasions where I found myself in those sorts of settings, right? And I wonder if when people saw me in those settings, if they thought that I should be careful.
Mm-hmm. Well, they did.
Yeah. And that's the reaction.
Yeah, they did.
Now, with the knowledge that he didn't return, and we heard it, well, we can't let him go out there by himself. Why didn't he know that, he should, and the parents were being asked and questioned, why would you let him go out there by himself? And all these sorts of things. But when I see the picture, the photograph, I see possibility and I see the weight of history.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense. And when other people see it, this is why I say race it can't help but be involved, because when people saw that picture, they had a certain reaction to it, especially African Americans and many white people too as well. People of all different ethnicities, like, wait a minute, why is he the one that didn't not come back home? Right? It's not alive. And when people see that picture, they draw a conclusion. What do you think other people see, but based on the reaction to the story? What do you think people see beyond you, when they see this picture? Because that was the first thing they saw and the only thing they saw for a while, right?
Yeah, I think more than anything, people were asking questions about why would he put himself in that position, right? So, and that's an honest question to ask, that is rooted in the world in which we are formed. And then, it's clear that he's the only one that didn't come back. That suspicion is a reasonable response. And then the sheriff, who concludes rather quickly that this was just simply an accidental death with no investigation, really. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, the weight of history and common sense kicks in.
You know what every entrepreneur tells themselves? Oh, I'll just do it myself. Posting another option. Lean for
how this thing is taking on.
Always skip that.
Use the promo code LEMON.
Always skip your
TAKELEAN.com. The promo code is LEMON.
I can't believe
Here we go.
How this thing is taking on a life of its own, as they say. Why there's so much engagement around this. Every day when I report on this, people tune in droves. And it has been, as we're taping this, it'll be almost a month, right? As we're taping this. And I think it's going to go on for a while until there's some answer. So all of that is on top of this, and that is what is happening. You have the media coverage, right? And people don't usually cover this in the media. You have the mainstream folks who, they did a little bit and then they don't, you know what I'm saying? But when it was Gabby Petito or, the woman in Aruba, Natalie Holloway, A-block stories.
This story, for me, carries the weight of our moment. Mm-hmm. Don, we are under assault from every angle. All the trains are running at once. I said earlier that the world that made our lives possible,
right?
They are systematically dismantling it. At every turn.
At every turn.
And so,
with the laws that were meant to protect us, they're using against us.
So this particular incident, right, carries the weight not only of the history of Mississippi, not only of the violence that we typically associate with that state. That's why the Emmett Till story keeps coming up, right? But it carries the weight of what we are feeling as the nation engages in, right, this dismantling, as we witness people who were once friends capitulating, right? As we see it happening. And then so you have to ask yourself the question, if the world that made our lives possible is no more, then what will be the world for our children, for people like Nolan? And then when you start asking that question, then Nolan's death shows up in a particular sort of way. What happened in Dallas, Texas, whatever, shows up in a particular sort of way. It carries the burden and weight, right, of our politics, of what's happening around us. And then, of course, the uncertainty that comes with all of it.
You mentioned D.L. Hughley before. D.L., I think, says something that is very profound as well, which I have thought about, and so has Charles Blow has talked about this as well, is that most African Americans in this country, first of all, most African Americans live in the South, right? Yeah. All right, population-wise. But most African Americans have lived under Republican, mostly red states, under Republican rule or whatever you want to call it, administrations. So they really have very limited knowledge, if not any knowledge, of what it would be like to be under a Democratic administration in their own town. I don't mean a president and all that, but under the laws and the rules of, of a Democratic municipality or city or town, because most of them live in red states where there's a Republican governor, there's a Republican mayor, you know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And that means very specifically in terms of resource distribution, what our communities experience. It means very concretely the nature of the schools that our children attend in those particular places. It means specifically the nature of policing of our particular communities, what we have to teach our children and how they have to navigate X, Y, and Z spaces. It has tangible, concrete implications. And you can't just simply say we shouldn't talk about it.
Right. And I say that explicitly because that's under Republicans, right? You have these regressive ideas about what books need. At least we have it now, and we've had it historically too. What books should be, read aloud in school, or kids should be allowed to read. We have to ban this book. We don't want kids shaming them and feeling bad about themselves because they learn about racism. Right. On all of those types of things. That's a political thing as well. It's not just a race thing. It's a political thing, which they're intertwined. And it's also a Christian nationalism thing.
Exactly. And, I think I've said it before, maybe to you, when we've talked, before, but we're in a second lost cause. And what do I mean? So, when we think about the collapse of Reconstruction, and we think about redemption, that's a political process. You think about the Mississippi Plan. What's the Mississippi Plan? The Mississippi Plan was we're going to disenfranchise all of these black voters, and we're going to do it by way of violence, and we're going to seize control of the mechanisms of government.
This is happening now.
But that's 1876, 1877, 1878. So, we think about Colfax, Louisiana in 1873, Vicksburg in 1874, massive violence. But when we think about what happened in the state of Mississippi, before Wilmington in 1898, but happened is a literal coup. They ran the quote unquote carpetbaggers out, and the violence directed at black. That's reunion. That's redemption. The lost cause is not physical, political violence. It's epistemic violence. It's an assault on what we know, how we tell the story of Reconstruction. So, and that doesn't begin in the South. It begins at Columbia University in New York City. The Dunning School. They write the first histories of Reconstruction. And what are they saying? They're saying that these corrupt carpetbaggers came and gave these black people political power who did not have the ability, the capability, or capacity to engage in governance. And what we saw was massive corruption. And then the South was redeemed. So it's an assault on what we know. And we're in a moment where we see a convergence here. There's a second lost cause. The way in which we tell our story. They're literally trying to disappear us in the history of the country. And where the concentrated forms of that effort at disappearance is in these Republican-held states where the majority of black people are. Now, we can worry about our babies in the midst of that. We have to. We have to figure out how we're going to respond to that. And we need to do it sooner rather than later.
You're reading my mind. Go on.
But we worry about our babies. But remember, who were the babies who were educated in the lost cause? They turned out to be the adults who were vicious and violent in the context of our efforts for freedom in the mid-20th century. So not only should we be worried about our babies, we have to be worried about their babies.
Yes.
You see, who are they educating their children to become? You see, and what does that mean for democracy in the long term?
You are like me. You're Gen X, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought maybe you were a millennial.
Oh. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
I asked that.
Yeah, right. With all that
the
gray
Gen
hair.
X folks that I went to school with, high school with, and so on, I was like, man, I thought they were going to be different, right? And then I go on social media. So I don't know. Someone will tell me. I used to go on social media. Someone will say, "Did you see what such and such said about you at Facebook?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't see that." "Did you see what about blah 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 blah?" I'm like, "No, I don't see that. I don't know what you're talking about." Then I look. They send it to me, and I'm go, "What the hell? like, who are these racist people? What happened?
You know,
Many of them men, not all of them, not exclusively.
Right.
You know, Don, I think, you know, the data is clear. Many of our social networks are highly segregated. We're walking mysteries to each other. Because in the intimate spaces, the places where the heart works, where loves are expressed, you know, our worlds are more often than not really, really homogeneous. And so racism flourishes in interesting sorts of ways, not by way of intent, but because our social networks are so segregated, and Black people's social networks aren't as, shall we say, powerful as other networks. People, I'm just doing something for my friend here, you know, but our networks aren't as powerful as other social networks. So sometimes it's not intentional racism. It's just I'm helping out Cousin Joe, and I happen to be the CEO of X, Y, and Z. I happen to own this particular company. Our networks aren't populated by a lot of those sorts of folks. So when you have hyper-segregated social networks, racism thrives in intimate spaces.
Wait a minute. Explain to me what you mean by that. What does that mean?
So, you know, what I mean by that is, you know, give you an example. Remember when the governor in Virginia got caught, well, supposedly with blackface, wearing blackface?
Oh, yeah. I do remember that.
And somebody asked me about, I think I was on the Today Show, and somebody asked me about it. And I said, well, if he had somebody in his family that he really loved, that really loved him, he would have known not to do that. Because he wouldn't have hurt him. You know, there would have been something, some connection.
Yeah.
Or you think about, I'm going back to the Emmett Till comment. People knew who killed Emmett Till because they played checkers with him. They drank beer with him. Folk knew who went to Jan 6 and the Capitol because they coached the soccer team. They were part of the volunteer fire department. They ate dinner with them at night. They ate breakfast with them in the morning. They kissed them goodnight. So it's in the intimate spaces, the places where our ignorance, our hatreds, right, acquire legs. And then sometimes what happens is even if you're not committed to these ugly views, you know, you just say, Uncle Joe, we're not going to talk about that over the Thanksgiving table.
Right. We don't discuss that.
We don't discuss it.
Yeah.
But because we're walking mysteries to each other, and the only way we can get to know each other is that those worlds have to kind of move in different ways, such that you can see me not as an abstraction, not as a stereotype, but as a living, breathing human being. And our intimate lives are so, I'm at the top of my profession. When I go home, I'm in a segregated world for the most part. When I go play golf, I'm elite, mostly segregated. That's all I tell people when I travel. Think about your last wedding.
Yeah.
Who was there? Who were you sharing, you know, the moment with? And so when we think, so how does it happen? When we were in high school and you know, I'm hanging with Ron Krotozinski and all of these folk who were my white friends, and then we move into our worlds as we age and we raise our children, and those worlds are really hyper segregated.
Yeah. Well, I think about the only wedding I think about, I've gone to a wedding recently, but you're right about that. Most of the time I go to weddings, you know, sometimes I'm like, my dad would say, you look like a fly in a bucket of milk, right? I'm thinking about my wedding. There was everybody. Like, I mean, Indian, black, white, Latino, Chinese, like everybody, right? Because, you know, but I wonder, you know, as I've been talking about conversations and thinking about it, when I lived in the South, I actually mingled more with, growing up with white people, but it was mostly socioeconomic because we were all kind of in the same place socioeconomically. Now here in the North, it's a whole nother show. If you know what I'm saying. It's about, if you have most of the people who are, you know, the wealthy folks or whatever are at the top of their craft or professions, they're white. Now there's some of us, and I'm not, don't get me wrong, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
People in the South, I find black people and white people like just interact with each other way more than they do in the North or any other.
Well, you know, I mean, I think Baldwin was right, Don. Is if the South gets it right, you know, if it ever figures out the riddle, right, then we will open up the possibility for the country to be otherwise. The South is the beating heart, as Imani Perry argues in South to America. The South is the beating heart of the nation, you know. Southern food, soul food, Southern food. It's just only difference is seasoning, in terms of menus and folks, when we think about the overlap and that intimacy has everything in it. Here I'm using intimacy in a different way.
Right.
The way the culture lives and breathes has everything to do with the institution of slavery and how it shaped the region and continues to shape the region. Those ghosts have the region by the nape of the neck. But I think, it's, how can I put this? I always think back to Mississippi. Mississippi as a state is so beautiful. Where I'm from is so beautiful. The moss that hangs from white oaks.
Y'all aren't prettier than Louisiana.
Anyway,
the swamps and our moss trees.
I'm from Moss Point. It's called the River City.
I know.
Bayous run all throughout the city.
And the reason it's called Moss Point is
because of the moss on the tree.
Yeah.
And what I mean, though, is that at the same time that you have that beauty, you have black racers that'll chase you down the street. Those snakes, water moccasins in those beautiful bayous.
Don't I know?
And so it is this
gators.
Yeah, it's this contrast of beauty and absolute danger. And I think that's the South. It's this collision.
Yeah. Right? Did you get chased by a racer as a kid?
No, but a couple of friends did.
And they said you'd have to go.
You got to zigzag.
You got to zigzag, right?
You got to zigzag.
Because if you go straight, it's going to get you.
It's going to get you. Now, what does that mean?
Or lamprey-eel. What we used to call as a kid a lamp eater. That's what
I would have to, during the summers, you'd have to race to go to the mailbox because the horseflies would tear you up before you get back in.
I remember people come in the house and they'd be like, "Oh, God dang it." And I'd say, what? They said, "I got out of the car, almost stepped on that damn snake." And I luckily I didn't. I am scared to death of snakes, but that's the South.
It's this contrast.
Danger.
I know about
overcoming danger.
I know about all my children. General Hospital,
Edge of Night,
because
Young and the Restless.
Because it was too hot to go outside.
Yes, but then sometimes they send you out there and say, "Go drink out of the hose pipe."
And I know the specific taste of that water.
I love it.
So I think it's this. It's just the nature of the place. It is just. We could call it a kind of region of contrast, or more accurately, a region of contradictions.
So when I said you were reading my mind, what I was thinking about is that people are putting a lot of weight and hope on 2026 and 2028. And are we going to be disappointed, or
we got a lot of work to do?
But because there's way more work to do than 2026 or 2028. That's not going to end any of this.
I think what we have to do is to shift. I understand why people are putting the weight on it. Sometimes, as Americans, we're so damn melodramatic. And what I mean by that, we have our obvious villains and our obvious heroes. And so there's this thing that if only we're going to see the back of Donald Trump's head and we're going to be okay. But we did it once and we weren't. Right? So the idea that you just need to banish the villains, right, from Washington, D.C., and somehow that'll get us back on the road. That's an adolescent vision of the world. But this is important. 2026 and 2028 are important for this reason. We have to create the most optimal conditions under which to struggle. We have a lot of work to do.
The most optimal conditions under which to struggle.
You see?
That's good.
So it would be a very different world. Now, even though Kamala Harris embraced the Biden position on Gaza, even though there were some issues with regards to the way in which the Democrats think about the economy, think about a range of ways in which we can argue that it opened the door for DSA, it would be a radically different world to struggle in if she was president as opposed to Donald Trump. So when I say optimal conditions, I'm not arguing that the election of Democrats, the taking over of the House or the Senate will somehow resolve the deep systemic problems that this democracy faces. I'm not trying to suggest that. What I am suggesting, though, is that it will make it a much more, I don't want to say pleasant. It would
bearable.
It would give us more room to move.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not so oppressive.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Bob Moses, the late SNCC organizer, told me, he spent a year at Princeton. He told me.
Not Robert Moses, the guy at the house here in New York.
No, Bob Moses, the Bob Moses. He told me once, he said, if it wasn't for the civil Civil Rights Act.
Yeah.
The piece of legislation that Lyndon Baines Johnson watered down that everybody thought was just milquetoast wasn't worth anything. So much so that they had to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But he told me if it wasn't for the Civil Rights Act of 1957, they would have locked us up and threw away the key like they did Mandela. So that piece of legislation created the conditions under which they could organize and mobilize. It wasn't a panacea. It wasn't the answer.
Oh, I see what you're doing.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So what we have to do, and
We're still struggling. We're still fighting. Hoses are still, but the conditions were there. The laws were there. We just had to keep fighting and keep pushing.
So what's important about 26 and 28 isn't that the Democrats hold the answer to our problems, because they're part of it.
Right on.
You see? But if they're in office, it creates optimal conditions for us to hold them accountable too.
A couple things on that. What do you think of the DSA?
Look, I think, there's always, just really quickly, I think they're very actually healthy for the country. The fact that they've been reduced to these slogans of no prisons, no borders, and whatever the last
dismantling the Senate and the presidency,
and what there are. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But when you see that, I didn't mean to cut you off. But when you hear that, you're like, wait. It makes me think of, and look, I do think after. I'll say this, pretty confidently, after what has happened recently with Trump and. I do think we need to take a look at our systems of government to see if they're actually holding and working. And so I don't believe that we should dismantle everything, but I do think that we need to take a look. And after we do, maybe I'll have a more emphatic answer. Maybe I'll say we do need to get rid of that. Maybe we should have a parliamentary system. I don't know.
Can I just tell you something here? Look, people ask me all the time whether better help actually school when education, right? The women are
as thoughtful people
to define them.
The two-party system.
Text LEMON to 511-511 or visit msiunitedstates.org. Text fees may apply.
One of the frustrating things about contemporary politics, the two-party system, is the willingness of the Democratic Party to argue on the terrain set by the Republican Party.
Right.
And so,
but also Democrats do define themselves by their critics.
Right. So
they let their critics define them.
And so she had no interest in it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for us as thoughtful people, as thoughtful citizens, to begin to think about the nuance of these positions. Right. That is to say, some folks are prison abolitionists. Other folks hold the view that carcerality shouldn't be the response to crime. We should think about it in a different sort of way. But they're all in the same camp in some ways, right? So I think it's important for us to try to break free from the stranglehold of Cold War politics.
Yeah.
And what happens, I wrote a piece for my Substack, A Native Son, entitled Imagination Capture.
Your Substack is amazing.
Thank you.
Native Son.
Yeah,
Native Son, everybody. It's amazing.
But it's called Imagination Capture. Every time we try to think outside of the box, every time we try to draw outside of the lines in terms of our politics, they force us back into the box. And so I think DSA is a healthy moment in our politics.
So you think Democrats, some sort of centrist, moderate Democrats, corporate Democrats should embrace the DSA?
I don't think they should embrace it. I think they should have an honest debate. They should have ideas that can compete.
Okay.
And I think it's really important because this is just
they're going to try to push them out.
Of course, they're going to, because it's called vital center politics. Arthur Schlesinger wrote this book, right? In the midst of after World War II, there's the threat of fascism, or in the midst of it, the threat of fascism and the threat of Stalinism or communism. He wants to put forward this robust liberalism. So at the heart of a certain vision of the Democratic Party is that you have to hold off the right, its extremes, and you have to hold off the left and its extremes. And we find ourselves, because they think them as equal, right, as equally dangerous.
Right.
And I just think we just have to break free from that framework.
Are you saying the corporate Democrats and Republicans are like two sides of the same coin?
The Venn diagram. There's this overlap. I think most people in this country are more comfortable with racists than they are with leftists. They're more comfortable with fascists.
Say more.
They're more comfortable with fascists in their midst than people who are trying to hold oligarchs and corporations to account.
Wow. Because?
Maybe because there's the overlap. Because many of them are, shall we say, benefiting from the world that the corporations and the oligarchs make possible.
Okay, so speaking of politics this way, do you think Kamala Harris will run?
I don't know.
Do you think she should run?
No.
Why not?
I'm not sure. You know, there are moments that pass. I don't think this political moment is. Let me put it more in this way. Not in some sense of with some sense of certainty. I just think we've passed a certain kind of window. Mm-hmm. That window is closed, and I don't know what the country is ready for. But I just know that certain kind of past iterations of our politics just might not catch traction. People are longing for something different.
Does race or gender factor into it?
Absolutely.
It's just that moment you think is people are looking for something different.
Yeah, and it's a numbers game. Remember the key to Trump's success is his ability to turn out low propensity white voters. And he's been turning out low propensity white voters by activating grievance and hatreds.
Do you know, I think his name is Jason Johnson, the comedian, where he says that Trump is the Obama on the right, that he ignites the same sort of thing that African Americans think about their history. As white people think about their history.
Trump is white Obama. He's Obama for white people who hated the idea of Obama. Yeah. And it's like, that to me is why I think people keep underestimating him.
And they've done the numbers game, and there's more of them than they know that there's more of them than there are us. And if he can generate that number, this is the dilemma, the quandary of the Republican Party, because they know that prior to Trump's ascendance, they they did the autopsy report. They thought, the demographic shifts were such that they were going to be a permanent minority party. But there were folks and this goes back to the 60s. Folks have been talking about this numbers game, right? And Trump figured it out. And they're trying to find a political figure who can continue to activate those low propensity white voters.
So you don't think she should run? Who do you think should run?
I have no idea.
Not Ossoff? You don't know?
I haven't, the question of Israel looms large over this upcoming election. So I don't know how that's going to take root. And it doesn't mean that, Jewishness is by definition disqualifying, but there are going to be some hard questions to answer around Israel and Netanyahu and others. And
Wes Moore, same questions around race.
Same questions around race. We have to be honest about where we are. And so I don't know. Andy Bashir, is he just another warmed over version of a centrist Democrat who could appeal across folks? I don't know.
I'm not saying nothing against anyone, but like a centrist Democrat, I don't think people want that anymore.
That's what I mean.
I don't think even people like who may be center right or may vote for a Democrat, I don't think they want that kind of Democrat. No, I think they like the populism. I actually think that many of them respect Mamdani. They may not agree with, but that type of candidate. I think that because the same people there are people who on the ticket who voted for Trump and who voted for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. And, I think, I got in trouble for this. When President Obama opened up the Presidential Center, I got in trouble for this. And everybody was so excited. And I said, it's like listening to 80s music or 70s music. You love it, but it wouldn't crack the top 10 on today's charts. Something about the sound, you feel good about it. You can dance, you do the bus stop, or you do some kind of dance. It brings up memories, but it just wouldn't crack the top 10 of the current Billboard.
There was a time for that.
Yes, that kind of politics, I think.
You think so? I see what you're saying. Wow,
I got in a lot.
I'm not saying that.
I got in a lot of trouble. But what I'm saying though is that moment, the hope and change. Yeah, we're in a different. Think about these young folk. They've grown up with Donald Trump for the last 10 years.
It's like listening to Marvin Gaye. You love it.
Oh, Got to Give It Up comes on.
Lamar is on the radio right now.
Yeah, you're not denying the power of Got to Give It Up.
Right.
But there's a whole different. This mumble rap is happening or something like that.
Okay. So, wow. Wes Moore, you don't know. You think it has to be a white guy? You're not sure.
I'm not sure. I don't know. All I know is this:
woman. You said you don't know Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
I don't know.
What about me?
You knew that was coming. See, this is the thing. We're in such a serious moment.
Yeah.
What we need is something that is elusive in our time, and that is seriousness.
Yeah.
I think I don't want spectacle to define our politics. For me, your power is not this. It's really the authenticity of your voice, the space you open up for the kind of reflection that serious democracy requires. Whether that involves you running for president or not, I'm not sure.
So look, I respect that. And you said, I asked him, he told me, I said, what do you think? And he goes, I said, I want to run. I told you why. And then I said, but what if it catches on? He said, you're delusional. He did say that. So look, I respect that. And that's why I tell people you can disagree or you can whatever and still not, be enemies or insult each other. I don't find that insulting at all. It's a matter of fact, I like your candor. The thing for me is that I think that there needs to be transparency in how we elect our president, especially the amount of money that goes into it, the effort that goes into it, the negativity, the opposition research, all of that. We hear about it surface wise, but so far there hasn't been a campaign that has been completely transparent about that and educating people about the process along the way in a way that is, I'm not hiding anything. This is what's happening. This is what I need to in order to do this. Maybe I'm going to have to get a donor from this place, or maybe, whatever it is, we haven't had that. And I think in this information age, in this social media and digital age, it's time for that. And that might actually make the difference. And I don't know if I can get that by just being a journalist and following someone else, because then I'm dependent on their degree of candor and transparency rather than my own full.
I hear that, and I'm gonna have to think about it a little bit more, although I still think he's delusional. But I also said this, I should say this. I said that I was concerned about your heart.
Yeah.
In the midst of all of this. Because, decency, being a good human being, right? Suffer. You suffer in this environment. So the first expression, before I said he was delusional, was an expression of concern and care for you.
You said you're worried about my heart, and you said they will try to destroy you.
Exactly.
And not necessarily the Republican.
Yeah. No. Exactly. But I think this is I understand the motivation, but I also...
That's part of the motivation.
Yeah, part of the motivation.
Yeah.
I also think that we're at such a crisis point that it's the questions around transparency, the ways in which elections happen in the country, those are important questions. But whether this fragile republic remains is the central question. Yeah. And part of what we can't do in this moment, remember we talked about why 26 and 28 is so important. We have to create the optimal conditions to struggle, is that we can't play games in this critical moment because we're on the precipice. I mean, the abyss is there. And so there has to be a kind of seriousness that we bring to the political process with our particular assets and skill sets.
No, I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but if I did it, it would be serious. I would not be playing games.
Of course.
And if I did it, but I'm not saying I'm going to.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I thought people started asking me about it, and I'm like, well, why do people keep asking me? I'm sure they were just like, well, I can't believe he said that he might. But anyways, one more thing.
Yeah. No.
Did you see my interview with Hunter Biden? Have you been watching some of his interviews?
I've been watching some of his interviews, but I haven't seen your interview with him.
What do you think of what's happening with him? Because he's the flavor of the month right now.
That's it.
I don't mean that in a negative way.
No, I'm just saying, but that for me, right? I mean, I don't ever want to throw a human being away.
Right.
There's always room for redemption. Just because Hunter Biden is willing to speak his mind, cuss every now and then, jump on this, go on Joe Rogan, do this, doing it. I understand that. I get it. But what is required of us is something more. We, the American people, we are going to have to take on the responsibility of saving this place. And it's not going to be because of the flavor of the month. We have to do something much more serious.
Thank you. I've kept you too long. You got tea time.
No, you haven't.
Here's the book. I'm telling everyone, you got to get this book. America, USA, How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversaries. Eddie S. Glaude Jr., best-selling author of Begin Again. The book is amazing. Go get it, everyone. Thank you, Eddie. Appreciate it
so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate you. Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything.